Okay, so this video is here to explain the 15th nakshatra out of the 27 nakshatras in Vedic sidereal astrology. The name of this nakshatra is known as Swati Nakshatra. This is a nakshatra that falls in between 6.40 degrees of Libra to 20 degrees of Libra. The symbolism for this nakshatra is a single blade of grass. The sexual animal associated with this nakshatra is a male buffalo, and the deity that rules and controls this nakshatra is known as Vayu. And the planet that rules and controls this nakshatra is the shadow planet known as Rahu. And I shouldn't have too much to say about this nakshatra, but I took notes down, so this might be a lengthy video. Who knows? So, where do I begin with this nakshatra? Let's start off with the symbolism being a single blade of grass. So, what I took from this, knowing that one of the many symbolisms of this nakshatra is a single blade of grass, is that one thing to know about this nakshatra is that it represents individuality. It represents ego. It represents rebellion or rebelliousness. Because apparently, from my understanding, when you break down the word Swati and all this stuff, it means self, soul, ego, or the independent one. So that is like the energy of this nakshatra. And with that knowledge, when I think of a single blade of grass, I sort of think of like, you plucking gray hair out of your head. And the next day that same gray hair came back. Or you just can't get rid of that one piece of gray hair. Or you're shaving and you thought you shaved your legs clean or whatever, but there's still that one little piece of hair. Or you trying to kill this one little bug, this one little insect, but you can't kill it. You can't seem to hit it. It's like that one piece of hair that always keeps growing back instantly, that you just can't get rid of no matter what. You try to dye your hair, it's still there. So it's almost like that rebelliousness. Like no matter what you try to do to cut me down, I'ma always be standing up strong and tall. You can't tear me down. And that is one essence of what I take away from this nakshatra with the symbolism. And then knowing that the planet that controls this nakshatra is Rahu, the Asura, tells you a whole lot about this nakshatra also. It further signifies the rebelliousness of this nakshatra. I already made a long, lengthy video on Rahu and Ketu, so I'm not going to be too lengthy. You can go look at my playlist if you want to see that. But Rahu is essentially this, he's one of two halves of a whole, of an original being, of an original deity known as Swabanu, who was a Asura, an anti-god or a demon or whatever, who wanted to drink this elixir like the other benevolent gods and become immortal or gain hidden sacred knowledge. And he stole this elixir through deception. And he ended up getting decapitated, and one half became Rahu, the head of a dragon with no body, and the second half became Ketu, the dragon who is headless and just has a body and stuff. So we see that from that little tidbit that Swati natives have and the desire to achieve great things, to achieve great heights, to want to touch and obtain things that they might not, shouldn't venture out towards and get. And when they get too dangerously close or too high up on a ladder, they get knocked down. And basically this video is going to be like numerous examples to highlight that theme that I just told you. So unfortunately, when you go and look up this nakshatra, and maybe through books or the internet, the deity of it is Vayu, but they always jump to another person who exemplifies the qualities and traits of this nakshatra or Vayu, and that is Hanuman. Hanuman is stated to be like the spiritual son of Vayu, and this sort of frustrates me a bit, but I'm still, I'm an eternal student. I'm very ignorant, but I want to learn more about Vayu, and I'm not able to find too much information on Vayu. Maybe it's because Vayu doesn't maybe have too much information on him in ancient scriptural texts. Who knows? But anyway, through the books it always states that Hanuman is the spiritual son of Vayu and exemplifies the qualities of Vayu. But let's start off with what I do know about Vayu. Vayu is this wind god. Well, he's not a wind god. He is more. It's more specified through the text through the books that I've read that he is more so a god, a deity of air, and he really represents the prana that is in air. Prana is life force giving energy, and when you know that the deity that rules this nakshatra is air, you might think, okay, well, what's so important about air? Or air is boring, or what can you learn about air? Even from like the Avatar: The Last Airbender perspective, you know, if you didn't watch the series from beginning to end and you just maybe watched a few first beginning episodes, you're probably thinking air is probably the most boring power to have. I'd rather be able to move water and fire and earth or shoot lightning out. That seems more exciting and cool, but air is really slept on. So one of the things that I've learned is that, think about it, air doesn't exist in outer space. Air only exists in Earth. And that right there tells you that with air only existing within Earth and not in outer space, it highlights that Swati native people, they have the desire to want to obtain and grasp all of the worldly, earthly pleasures and desires. This is one of the reasons why this nakshatra is associated with entrepreneurship and individuality. Because think about it, the wind, you can't control the wind, and the wind is an invisible, unseen force, and it is something in air. It's something that we can take for granted. You know, we can take air for granted. It is stated that Vayu was participated in like some competition amongst some other gods, and they participated amongst some other gods, and he wanted, and the purpose of this to see which element was like more important to the human body. So it's supposedly stated that they practiced this tournament, this testament of their abilities on some poor soul, I assume. And they say that the god of vision or whatever left from the human's body and the human went blind or whatever god or deity, you know, took away the sense of taste or whatever left. And long story short, when Vayu left this person's body, we see that the human would die. Think about it. Air is probably the most important element. You can go a couple days without food. You might be able to even go a day or so without drinking anything, without water. But you can't survive a few minutes without air. You'll die, you'll suffocate. You go a few minutes without air go into your brain, and you'll start to receive permanent, irreparable brain damage. So you could go a couple days without a lot of things, but you will die in minutes if you don't receive no air. So that shows the importance of this nakshatra, and that little story right there shows you that Vayu is someone who is sort of overlooked, and they have to prove their importance, their sense of self. They have to, you know, show other people how great they are, because they might sleep on them and not realize it. Another story that I've seen from a book that I read in regards to Vayu is that one time that there is the sage known as Sage Narada, who took shelter from a great storm underneath a tree that didn't seem to be affected by the winds of the storm. And the sage commented on how powerful this tree must be, or sturdy this tree must be, or whatever. And the tree, you know, take this mythological stories with a grain of salt, the tree began to boast and think to itself how great it is and how it must be, stronger than Vayu, who is this god of air and wind and prana. And Vayu got upset and said, well, if you think you're so strong, then come and fight me right now. And he ends up blowing a whole bunch of leaves and flowers and branches and fruits down off of this tree, and states that I purposely don't blow wind in your direction out of respect for Lord Brahma, who took a rest and refuge underneath your branches. So that is another instance where Vayu had to prove himself to somebody that, hey, don't take me for granted. I'm very important. I'm very powerful. So you can see this theme repeat itself with Swati natives, where they feel as though that they might have to prove their worth to other people. People might forget how great and talented and powerful they may be when it comes to something in particular. And they always have to be, and they might therefore become very competitive because of that. So let's jump to Hanuman, because Hanuman does display some of these traits of Vayu, who will help us shine more light on this nakshatra. So why is it stated that Vayu is like this spiritual father or father of Hanuman? I don't know the exact details, ins and outs of this story, so take it with a grain of salt and do your own research. But from my quick little glance of research, apparently a mother was doing some puja, which is a ritual to be blessed with a kid, to have a kid. And during the process of her doing this ritual, I think there was somebody else doing another ritual, and the winds blew one of the offerings from that previous ritual into this woman's ritual, who was trying to manifest and pray for a kid. And it was from that wind blowing that offering from another ritual or whatever into this woman's ritual that Hanuman was born. So because the winds of Vayu carried over this offering from somewhere else into this woman's ritual, it is stated that he is responsible for Hanuman being born. So therefore he is sort of seen as like this spiritual father or whatever of Hanuman. So the little bit I do know about Hanuman is that he was a prankster and trickster when he was younger. And he had great abilities and powers. He could fly, and he was very strong. And he was very ignorant of his strength, of his greatness, of his ability. And it stated that one day he was hungry and he went and flown towards the moon. He was hungry and flew towards the sun because he thought that the sun was some big fruit. So he tried to eat the sun. And as he was trying to eat the sun, Indra ended up hitting Hanuman with like a bolt of lightning or whatever. Indra, who's the king of the gods, the king of the heavens, a rain god, and he makes it rain with his lightning. He ends up hitting Hanuman and ends up knocking Hanuman out. Vayu is upset that he just ended up dropping and knocking out a little kid. And out of his anger, Vayu ends up taking away all of the air from Earth. He made Earth suffer out of his anger for Indra knocking out his son. But after much pleading from other gods and from Indra, he eventually returns the earth, returns the breath, returns the life, returns the air back to Earth. And therefore people who have fainted, they woke back up. So we see that air is associated with life. You can't survive without the life that is within air. And and therefore Vayu is very powerful. And we seen that little story from Hanuman that what was he doing? He was flying towards the sun. And where is the sun? The sun is outside of Earth. And what is also outside of Earth? There is no air outside of Earth. So whenever these people from like either maybe a literal or even metaphorical perspective. Try to obtain great work, try to obtain great things that is like beyond earth, because Hanuman was trying to go and eat the sun because he thought it was some piece of fruit. They'll get knocked down. Just like Rahu, he got his head chopped off and now he's just the head of a dragon without a body. Just like Hanuman, who got hit and knocked out with a bolt of lightning because he tried to go and grab and eat the sun, which is of course outside of earth. And the story of Hanuman doesn't stop there. Hanuman was eventually like cursed or hexed by sages, by rishis, whatever, enlightened people, because he was playing tricks on these spiritual people. He was doing a whole bunch of pranks and tricks on them, and they got fed up with it. So they ended up cursing him so that he would like temporarily lose his powers or forget that he could fly and forget how powerful and great he was. And Hanuman ended up pleading for his abilities to return to him or whatever. And they told him that his abilities or his memory of his abilities and powers would return to him when someone else reminds him of his abilities and powers. And then he ends up and gets, he becomes educated by some of the rishis or by other spiritual people. Now, since he doesn't have his abilities to play pranks on people. So what do we learn from that story? We learn yet again that from that story, Swati people will likely have to maybe be reminded of how great they are. They themselves sometimes, they might forget or sleep on how great their abilities are. But at the same time, Swati natives, they can abuse their abilities. They can abuse their powers. Vayu is someone who is, overlooked and slept on. And if, Vayu's angry and having a bad day, he could take all the life away from Earth. He could take all the air, and therefore we will all die. Hanuman, he has great strength and abilities and is about to go into outer space and eat or try to eat and swallow the sun. And he uses abilities to play pranks and tricks on people. So we see that these people not only can get knocked down from life or by the universe or by God if they become over ambitious. That's one thing with this nakshatra. They can become over ambitious. We see that, these people, they could get knocked down because they could become over ambitious and they can abuse their power sometimes. And they might have to be reminded by other people how great they are. And also, Hanuman is stated to be a very loyal servant or devotee to Lord Ram, who is stated to be the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. Vishnu is one of the major three trinities in Hinduism. You got Brahma, who is the creator, who produced, life and humans and gods and stuff. And you have Shiva, who is associated with time and death and destruction and endings on literal and metaphorical senses. And then you have Vishnu, who's known as a preserver. Vishnu was cursed to have to keep being reborn and live and die the life of a mortal. So he incarnates, and his incarnations sort of end up saving the world or pushing the world or the collective in a certain direction, pushing humanity in a certain direction. And in Vishnu's 7th incarnation as Lord Ram, Hanuman ended up becoming a great asset and servant and devotee to. Ended up becoming a great devotee to Lord Ram. So, if you wanted to continue pulling those traits of Hanuman into this nakshatra, you could say that these people could potentially be very loyal and devoted. But I prefer to stick to the characteristics of Vayu, of what little I do know. But the reason that I mentioned that Hanuman is also associated with servitude and devotion is because Saturn is a planet that is exalted in Libra. Now, don't quote me on this. I don't know if it's stated that Saturn is the most exalted in the nakshatra of Chitra or Vishaka. I believe it's one of the two. But from the little bit that I have researched on this nakshatra, it is stated that maybe like praying to Hanuman and worshiping Hanuman is a great remedy for Saturn when it's transiting, or a great remedy for Saturn in your own birth chart, because Saturn is associated with servants and servitude, and Hanuman was someone who was very loyal and devoted to Lord Ram, and he was also someone who was very physically powerful. He was able to pick up and carry a mountain and stuff mythologically. So it is just stated, it's supposedly stated that Hanuman has the ability to tame the malefic effects of Saturn. So Hanuman is heavily associated with Swati Nakshatra. So it might be considered a very good placement for Saturn to be in Swati, according to what I've researched and looked up. Also, another exemplification, another thing that simplifies the qualities and traits of Swati Nakshatra is the male buffalo. And if you've been following my nakshatra videos, then you've probably heard me run this mythological story into the ground, starting from Hasta all the way to Swati, of the male demon buffalo known as Mahishasura, who I go into great detail in Hasta Nakshatra, because Hasta Nakshatra is a female buffalo. So the buffaloes sort of share similar traits. So I'm not going to go too long-winded with this, but Mahishasura was this demon who was granted a wish to be undefeated, that no one could kill him except for a woman, I believe. No man, no male gods or whatever could defeat him. Only a woman could beat him. So, and he terrorized people. And Goddess Durga, a female... Yes, this video got long and the camera cut off. But anyway, as I was saying, the female goddess Durga was created by other gods. And her job was to go and slay this demon. And if you look up Goddess Durga, she's riding a tiger, holding the head of the demon whose head she chopped off. And then you have Lord Ayapa, who I mentioned in Chitra Nakshatra. And he was born because that same male demon, he had a sister named Mahishasura, a female buffalo chick or whatever. She wanted vengeance for her brother being killed. And she made the wish that only a son from Shiva and Vishnu could kill her. And Shiva and Vishnu are both males, so it's like impossible for two guys to bear a child. But they made that work because Vishnu can reincarnate on Earth as a human. So he took in the incarnation of a woman, and him and Shiva gave a son. They bared a child, and boom, that child ended up killing that female buffalo demon. So we see, and also, yeah, that tells us a lot. That tells us that the buffalo nakshatras, which is Hasta and Swati, they can achieve great powers. They can achieve to be great heights and positions of power in the world. But when they abuse these powers, or when they try to mess with things, mess with like things that can destroy and mess with the structure and order of things, then a person in a high position of power will likely knock these people down from their throne. And Chitra Nakshatra, I'm not Chitra, and Swati Nakshatra shows you that a Swati native, they could either be like a buffalo, particularly a water buffalo or whatever. They could be like a buffalo and just laze around, eat grass, maybe smoke grass, but eat grass, smoke grass, play in the water, and lay around all day and sleep on their own potential and talents. Or the Swati native, either from someone else letting them know how great they are, just like honeymoon, or from them just being conscious and aware and realizing how great they are, they can go and achieve great heights and feats, but they run the risk of, being over ambitious. They run the risk of abusing their talents and abilities. And Swati natives, they're the win. And this nakshatra is mainly associated to be good with marketing and entrepreneurial type of stuff. And one of the reasons is because the Shakti of this nakshatra, I believe, is to like disperse the wind. Let me see what the Shakti, yes. It's the power to disperse and scatter like the wind. So the wind carries things far and wide. And that can, through planes to whatever. The point that I'm trying to make is that Swati Nakshatra, and due to that Shakti, the energy of this nakshatra to scatter things far and wide, information and news could travel far and wide. Like I said, air encompasses the whole earth. So these people not only can have great ambitious desires to want to maybe conquer and achieve everything through earth, but they could also be very great marketers. They could travel and move around a lot and spread their greatness or their news or their gossip or whatever far and wide with Swati Nakshatra. So now I'm about to go look at my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything. And no, that is essentially it when it comes to Swati Nakshatra. I hope this gave you great clarity and insight if you have Swati Nakshatra in your chart. I hope this helped you, and thank you for watching.